We're ready for another edition of Just Say No. Glad to be back with you. Today we want to cover a little bit of my own history, just so you get to know me again, since I'm back after a few years. Sam Melton here. I'm part Native American, been a powwow dancer, and very active in my native beliefs, and spent some time in Southeast Asia on the Thai-Cambodian border, the so-called killing fields, where Pol Pot had murdered thousands and thousands of his own people. We're trying to discuss the problem of Israelis' violent behavior toward the indigenous Palestinian people. And since I am an indigenous person, it takes me in a very personal way the behavior of these individuals who are not, and let's repeat that, not Sephardic Jews or natural Jews to Palestine or what they call Israel. They are European Jews, and most of them, that's a whole nother history lesson, if they are actually European or they even have real Jewish blood from the Middle East in them. That's another question. But anyway, getting back to my own self, I spent time on the Thai-Cambodian border. I've seen so many horrific things. Pol Pot's behavior certainly reminds me of the way Netanyahu's behaving. The difference I find between what Pol Pot did and what the Israelis are doing is that Pol Pot didn't want to waste ammunition, so he used basically clubs and machetes and blunt instruments to commit his murderous activity of so-called cleansing his realm, which was basically genocide, basically ethnic cleansing. And the Israelis are using automatic weapons, 60 caliber American M16s, Abrams tanks, even bulldozers, and airplanes, F-18s, F-16s, and whatever America has given them. Some say Israelis are paying for these weapons, but they are paying for these weapons from loans from the World Bank, which is basically America. So I would think they're not really paying for these weapons. And if anybody ever called those loans back, Israel would probably be bankrupt within a few months. But anyway, getting back to what we're talking about, I just want you to get to know me. I've spent a few semesters at UC Berkeley. I'm very interested in Asian studies and Middle Eastern studies, and I'm very interested in the study of theology and spirituality. Philosophy, especially Taoism, really influences me, and Sufism within the Islamic faith. I have a great fondness for Halaj. I don't know if many people know about Halaj. He wrote many poems. He was a very brilliant Sufi saint. And I certainly love Kabir, and I certainly love many Sufi saints. Myself, I have spent a little time in Afghanistan and India, and before that I was on the Thai-Cambodian border when the Pol Pot situation was going on, and trying to help the Cambodian people best as we could. We were of the International Red Cross. Many horrific things happened to these poor people, as is happening now to the Palestinians. Also, my own American Indian people have suffered great and horrific ethnic cleansing movements upon us, a genocide, in fact. In fact, many Jewish people have forbid us using genocide, but that's actually not true. The Americans were a much earlier genocide than the genocide of Adolf Hitler. And I want to make it clear, I have no sympathies for the Nazis. They were a terrible, terrible group of people that did vicious things to all Jewish people. And I find that as reprehensible as what's happening to the Palestinians today. In fact, I'm shocked that Israelis today think that it's okay to do the same thing that was done to them in Germany, to the Palestinian people now. My ideas are that I want to join a new peace movement. I was greatly active back in the days of the Vietnam War, and I was very active during El Salvador and Nicaragua when we were rebelling against, the assassinations going on, the death squads, and the drugs that were just coming into America in floods, and also South Africa. Nelson Mandela and different peace figures out of South Africa were brilliant. So the South African thing was a brilliant movement that should show us the way in this new movement to free Palestinian people and help them have their own territory. Basically, I want to promote this kind of movement in this country, since we are the main funders of the Israeli genocide program. And they have no other intention than destroying every last one of the Palestinians. In my second half of this program, I'm going to get into the actual maneuvers the Israelis are practicing and interrelating them to what I experienced in the Vietnam War. And I think there are tremendous similarities. I think even more than that, perhaps the Israelis are looking at that as a kind of roadmap toward what they hope to gain, which is the total genocide of the Palestinian people. Okay, I'm glad you can join me again. We're going to go to a clip, and after we come back from the clip, we'll talk a little bit more. And like I said, I also want to go into some of what I think the Zionists think in their military activities, in their political aggression against all Palestinian peoples, and the use of Hamas as a mask to totally annihilate the civilian population and the civilian dwellings and all the infrastructure in the Gaza, the West Bank, and now they're setting up for Ramallah. But all of this has been going on for well over 75 years, almost 100 years. This is an old conflict, and it's definitely, as was done to my own American Indian people, nothing more than a land grab. All right, let's go to our clip, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Born into war, the only tiny joy in their life right now. Not one, but two newborn babies, both of them ill. The family homeless in a cold, damp room in Han Yunis. And the gnawing fear. How do you save your children from the war, hunger and disease?
It was a difficult birth. I needed anesthetics and medicine that the hospital didn't have because of the war. The conditions are difficult and we are sitting on blankets. There are no vaccination. We need nappies, milk and clothes. And my husband isn't working.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
أنا وولادي الأربعة بننام بس على هذا الفرش.
I sleep with 4 children on this bedding. It's not enough to protect you from the floor. The weather is cold and the wind comes in. It's hard for the children. Chest infections, diarrhea. They were all ill in the last 2 months.
نزلة معوية نتج إسهال.
Danger too in the other Palestinian territory. This is the West Bank village of Hussan.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank, making it the deadliest year on record for Palestinians. Israel says it's targeting militants, but Palestinians say it's civilians who are being killed.
18-year-old Mahmoud Zayul was killed on Wednesday. His family say he was shot dead by the Israeli army during a raid. These videos were filmed by people in the village. The Israeli military says it was a riot and Palestinians threw explosives and stones. It says it's investigating the death. His mother, Safa, has lost her eldest child.
The army raids the area every day. They climb the wall and search cars and they fire shots. They occupy our land and it's natural to resist them. We don't have weapons, but stones. They respond to stones with snipers. They are afraid of stones.
These women are afraid for the future of their sons. The West Bank is boiling from Israeli raids, arrests and road closures. It's the same in Bethlehem, where Christmas has been cancelled and Christians rally to support Gaza.
I've never witnessed in the past 25 years of my life such an incredibly sad Christmas as this Christmas. We Palestinians, especially Christians, this year we cannot turn a blind eye to what's going on in Gaza.
No tree, no celebrations, only grave days ahead. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, from the occupied West Bank.
Olive trees have grown in these lands for thousands of years, a sign of permanence and resistance. They are politically important. Their oil was used to anoint kings, and economically essential, now including for Ahmed. He used to make good money working in Israel, but after the atrocities of October the 7th, almost all travel between Arab and Israeli areas was stopped, and he lost his job.
Sometimes I pick olives, other times I clean ropes. I chase work from day to day. In Israel, I used to work every day. I went there in the morning and left in the late afternoon. There's no work now. I work one day here, one day there, in the fields picking olives. I need to feed my family. What can I do?
And it's not just economic life that's been affected. Travel for Palestinians around the West Bank has been severely limited since October the 7th.
You cannot come and go. They have closed roads. I can only walk around my home. If you have land, you can work it, but you have to remain close to your home. I cannot neither go right nor left. Checkpoints are suffocating us.
The West Bank is divided into 3 areas, A, B and C. A is run exclusively by the Palestinian Authority. Israelis are banned from entering. B is jointly administered, and C is run by Israel, with the IDF responsible for security. Palestinian areas are split into small pockets, with Israeli roads often dividing them. Now, under the previous government of Naftali Bennett, the expansion of roads here in the West Bank was put on hold, but that has been completely reversed by Benjamin Netanyahu. That decision was welcomed by many in the Israeli settler movement. More than 500,000 live in the West Bank. The UN and many countries say all settlements are illegal and an obstacle to peace, something vehemently denied by the residents of Efrat.
In general, we have not stolen anyone's land. We are people that go to work in the morning, we run businesses, we have professors at university. We are people of the book. and not of the sword, and that's the way we would prefer to live. This war's been forced on us. We didn't choose it.
15,000 people live in this community just across the valley from Bethlehem. They say they have always had good relations with their Arab neighbours, but October the 7th changed everything.
I hope and I believe that the relations with our immediate neighbours here in the Arab villages, the relationships will continue to be good. Having said that, obviously there are security concerns, because there were instances near the Gaza Strip of kibbutzim where they had fantastic relationship with Arabs working on the kibbutz, and later discovered maps describing the kibbutz village with the names of the families, how many people were living in each house.
The people that live here in Efrat are separated from their nearest Arab neighbours by just a couple of 100 metres, a few farmsteads and a couple of fences. The last month has seen a massive Israeli security operation in the West Bank. They have arrested more than 1,400 Palestinians. They claim most were connected to Hamas. Just today, the Palestinian Authority said 18 people had been killed, taking the total to 170 in the last month. It has been met with Palestinian protest, both at the security crackdown and the increasing death toll from Israel's war in Gaza. Today in Bethlehem, there was a general strike. This is a more peaceful and prosperous part of the West Bank, but there are areas where there have been direct conflict between communities. In particular, some groups of settlers have been accused of attacking Palestinians. Here, one shoots a man in his leg. Oded Ravivi is Efrat's long-serving mayor. He says those settlers are an extremist fringe who do not represent his community.
Now we understand that there is a small group of extremists that do act violently, and he understands that these people need to be dealt with by the police, by the military services, by the secret services, and they should be trialed for what they do. The vast majority of people, Jewish people who live here, or 500,000 Jewish people who live here, deserve security, deserve to be treated like human beings, like law, people who obey the law, because that's the nature of these communities. Last night we had a meeting with the Prime Minister of all the mayors in Judea and Samaria. There was a consensus of all the mayors calling for the government to make sure that these extremists get arrested, get stopped. The quicker it happens, the less damage it will do to the Jewish population in Judea and Samaria, and definitely to the whole state of Israel.
Because they're giving you a bad name.
Undisputed, I can agree with a BBC reporter on that.
For years, the call has been for a two-state solution, an independent Palestinian nation in the West Bank and Gaza, with East Jerusalem as its capital. But that would require sacrifices from places like Efrat that they will be unwilling to make, and wider Israeli society unlikely to enforce. As he finishes his day's work, Ahmed's concerns are more simple.
Peace and security. To come and go with our cars, to see our children, to see peace, to live in our country without problems. We are looking to be able to feed our children, that's all.
Even before the events of the 7th of October, the West Bank was seeing a rise in violence. Two communities who both feel a connection to this land. Agreement was never going to be easy. It now seems further away than ever.
I hope that clip was informative, and that I'm bringing awareness to this particular problem that's going on in the Middle East. I am really, again, totally moved by these young students who are standing up for the right thing, for justice and human rights, which is super important. We want to give a shout out to Berkeley, which just recently happened, that the head of the Unified School District went to be interrogated. That's what I would say. I mean, to meet, I guess, the Congress, but I felt like it was more like an interrogation. It was reminiscent of the McCarthy era, and our head of the Unified School District held up fine. and she basically made it clear that us here in Berkeley, we are against anti-Semitism. We will have no prejudice against Jewish people, but we are very much also against prejudices against the Palestinians or any Arabs, including Arab Americans. Prejudice is not only uncivil, it's an ignorant behavior of ignorant people that lack understanding, education, and any kind of human sensitivity. It's completely absurd in this day and age that this kind of behavior is not only still continued, but being justified and upheld as a kind of patriotism. I myself am a true American. I am part American Indian. And they do not get to tell me what patriotism is. I know what patriotism is. I love this country, and I have served for this country, and I am very respectful of all who have served in for this country. And also, this country is founded on freedoms of all types of races, religions, skin colors, and even sexual preferences. This in America is part of what a democracy means. Everyone has the right to expression. Again, another shout out to my students. Everyone, according to the Constitution, has a right to freedom of speech and expression and academic freedom and the ability to intellectualize in the sense of their academic freedom and their own personal beliefs on how America and Israel should move in the future, who are taking our tax dollars and using them for very vicious and terrible things. Now, talking about this, it brings me to Rachel Corrie, who we're all just remembering, who was a beautiful young woman in, I believe, 2009, was protecting a doctor in Rafah. That's where the Israelis are today. So I think it's even more apropos that we salute Rachel Corrie and we remember her dearly. This was a beautiful young woman who gave her life to help the Palestinian people and all downtrodden people. She was an amazing individual who stood in front of a house that the Israelis were going to bulldoze, this Palestinian doctor's house, and they ran over her with our bulldozer. Our American dollars paid for this bulldozer. Yeah, maybe we loaned them the money that they can never pay back, but basically we paid for this bulldozer. It's our bulldozers, and made by an American company, and they not only ran over her, they backed up on her, and then I was around during that time. I understand they had beers and laughed about it like it was some kind of a joke. I was appalled. I was totally shocked and outraged. This is so terrible. I actually know Rachel Corrie's dad, Ron Corrie, who was a veteran in Vietnam, first Cav. And this guy is an outstanding individual whose daughter was doing brave and outstanding work as well as what he did. And this poor man, they crushed his daughter. They crushed his baby. I don't know how I could take it. I told Ron that. I don't know how I would take it. He had to go to Israel because they were pressing charges against the Israeli government, which came to nothing. These folks totally got away with outright murder and slaughter of a beautiful young woman who had her whole life ahead of her, who was not only incredibly intelligent, an incredibly compassionate human being, dedicating her life to helping others. It is outrageous that our tax dollars are paying for this kind of mayhem and slaughter. And let's remember the folks from the Hunger Kitchen that were Europeans, of the most of them. I think there was even some Americans, and they were targeted by the Israeli government and killed. Many of them killed, many of them seriously wounded. This is outrageous. This is something we cannot stand for and we cannot allow to go on. I want to bring this back in my conclusion to talking about Israeli tactics. Their tactics of terrorism. They're calling Hamas the terrorists. They are the terrorists. And America is the terrorists. They are doing this against an innocent population. This is outright slaughter. I have been there. I was on the Thai-Cambodian border in the days of the killing fields. I've seen massive amounts of bodies laid low. That's exactly what I'm seeing in Gaza. And that's exactly what they intend to do in Rafah. American people need to stand up and demand that this outrageous, ruthless, brutal, demonic behavior ceases, especially in our name, with our tax dollars. That's why the name of this show is Just Say No. Just say no to genocide. Just say no to violating human rights without impunity. Just say no to evil in this world that thinks they can just do anything they want to anybody they want because they have wealth. That is what's going on here. The accumulation of wealth in certain individuals' hands and the accumulation of power in certain politicians' hands has gone to their heads, and they have no moral fabric. They have no sense of the Constitution, constitutional rights, or the declarations of independence. And these are not patriots. These are criminals, war criminals, as much as the Nazis of Nazi Germany. Netanyahu is a war criminal, no different than Adolf Hitler and Pol Pot. That is the fact. That is the truth. He is committing crimes against humanity. The World Court and the UN need to take action. At the very least, make their opinions clear as to the behavior of these individuals that is absolutely outrageous. Beyond outrageous. It really is completely beyond any kind of logic or beyond any kind of decent human behavior. We really need to stop this. We really need to demand that we won't take this anymore. We will not take this crap anymore. We will stop the slaughter and the genocide of a peoples because they are brown peoples. And I know well that, as being an Indian and a brown man, I have suffered dearly in this, my own country. How many times they've called me a foreigner and told me to go home? You know, and I thought, you guys should go home. You came to our country, slaughtered our people, stole our land, destroyed our culture, and you're telling me to go home? I know what home you want me to go to, and that's my grave. Well, I won't be obliging. I will stand for truth, and I will stand for honor. That brings me to an individual that I have great respect for. Of course, my uncle, Will Corson, Lieutenant Colonel William Corson, who was on the Mekong Delta and in the bush with the Mountain Yard and succeeded in doing many, many great things in organizing these people and teaching them the foundations of true democracy. Then I want to salute to Hugh Thompson, who, during the My Lai massacre, this individual landed his helicopter and his other buddies in the other choppers told him, don't do it. Don't do it. These people will kill you. He landed. They had .60 caliber aimed at Vietnamese who they were making dig their own graves and were shooting them into it. He landed. He upheld the Geneva Convention, and he said to these individuals, the next person that shoots a Vietnamese, I will shoot you. This man did his duty as an officer, as a gentleman, as a true patriot. This is a true patriot. Just like my Uncle Bill, this is a true patriot. And I urge you all to read William Corse's books, The Betrayal, on Vietnam. It's very educational, and it's very reflective of what's going on now. This attitude of Israel, search and destroy, which means to terrorize the civilian population, to terrorize them into hating the people that are trying to protect them and cleanse their land of foreign colonialist domination. I mean, people should think, what would happen if a group of individuals invaded California? How would you feel and behave? That's what you have here. We need to understand the realities of the situation that are going on. We need to be logical, educated, and compassionate human beings. We need to stand up in this nation and put an end to the hemorrhaging of billions of our own tax dollars that should be used for healthcare, education, on and on and on we go. Not for murdering innocent women and children. And I believe now, because I've heard there's advisors on the ground with the Israelis, that we have boots on the ground. That's how we got into Vietnam. Now, do you want your young boys coming home after murdering and tearing up women and children, and they're going to dump this back on your society? You should reflect what happened in the days during the Vietnam War, when we trained individuals to be ruthless and then brought them back to the society. It did not go well. Before that time, I can remember, we didn't have no mommy killers and baby rapers and insane human beings. And I'm not blaming any GI. They need help. After you submit them to this kind of behavior, you need to offer them some kind of mental health care. Because they will have PTS, they will suffer. No individual escapes freely from participating in this kind of activity. I myself know and have felt these pains, truly. So I want to conclude this program this evening with the fact that we need to move forward, and we need to move in a big stance, and we need to protect our young college students. I'm calling on you, the workers, you, the regular salt and bread of America, the regular American people. Stand up for your sons and daughters in the university. They are standing up for what is right, what is just, what is fair, basic human rights. They are refusing to be moved. And America, we need to get behind them, not Israel. They are hemorrhaging our tax dollars, and our economy is already in shambles. Look around, homeless everywhere. I have a friend who's a medical research person. He cannot find funding for his projects, but there's plenty of money to send to Israel to murder women and children. And he's trying to fund medical research to further health care. Give me a break, America. We've got to stop this nonsense. We really, like during the Vietnam Day moratorium days, we gotta wake up and stop this crap. Enough of it. Enough of it. We have got to grab hold of our own future, to straighten out our democracy who has cancer right now. Look at what's going on. Trump is an absolute criminal. If you were in the military, I'm calling out you. This man has committed sedition on the United States of America. When my dad was in the military, this was a shooting offense. This was worse than treason. Sedition is when you're an officer and you turn on your own boys. You don't just sell out information to the enemy. You actually literally turn on your own boys. That's what Mr. Trump has done, the criminal. And then Butcher Biden, Genocide Joe, oh my God. He openly claims to be a Zionist. That's a traitor to the United States of America. Another traitor is Henry Kissinger, but that's another episode we'll have to go in. But he's gotten unlimited aid for Israel. This individual is his hands are so soaked in blood, there's just no end to it. And he's still going in and out of the White House. I don't know what he is, 96 or something like that? This person is still going in and out of the White House and influencing politics in America. No wonder we've arrived at this place. We've had a mentally ill person, a mental retard as president, Baby Bush. We've had a criminal as president who has committed sedition on the United States of America, urged people to attack the Capitol building. It's outrageous. America, you should be ashamed. But unfortunately, it seems we've lost all pride, so we have no shame. But I have shame. I am ashamed. I would laugh at a lot of stuff, but it ain't funny. A lot of my friends had flags laid on their coffins, and I don't like it. It's absurd, appalling, and vulgar. It makes me sick to my stomach. I'm sorry to be so hard, but we really need to wake up. And that our young students are waking up, this gives me tremendous heart and tremendous hope. And I pray for these individuals. I pray for this country. I really am asking you in America, search your hearts, search your mind, search your logic. What is it that it will take to stop this madness? What is it that it will take to realize what's happened here? Since they killed John and Robert, I have seen this whole government go from semi-corruption to total corruption. A mental ill person pretending to be president, shameful. I saw this man on TV go, that's exactly what he did. Then turned around and said, I don't know. Like a 2-year-old child. And this is our president? Shame on you, America. Shame, shame, shame. Wake up. Shame on you. Wake up. Take hold of your democracy. Stop this madness. We really must push forward, and we must protect our young people who are standing up against this madness.
The Israeli military said that it hit about 50 targets, including underground terrorist infrastructure. And as we speak, the sheer number of dead bodies continue to mount in Gaza. The death toll in the war-torn territory has surpassed 30,000. In Rafah, funeral services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the ongoing war in Gaza, infant twins Wissam and Naeem Abu Wanza were also among the ones who were buried. Many are still trapped under the rubble of ruins in Gaza's southernmost city. Palestinian Civil Defense released a video showing crew conducting rescue operations after airstrikes on Rafah. Meanwhile, the United States carried out its first humanitarian airdrops over the weekend. U.S. military planes supplied more than 38,000 meals into Gaza, where the United Nations says over 500,000 population are one step away from famine conditions. However, critics and aid agencies claim that it is extremely difficult to ensure that the airdrops do not end up in the hands of the Hamas militants. As Israel pursues its war with Hamas, experts claim that being forced to costly and inefficient airdrops shows Washington's limited influence over Israel.
We have crossings. It is better to send aid via crossings and better than dropping via parachutes. The parachutes aid is not enough for one family. This is nothing. Egypt should open its crossing and let trucks get in normally.
Calls for a ceasefire in Gaza are echoing across the globe. Hands off Rafah rallies are being held in cities worldwide. Demonstrators in Washington, D.C. called on the U.S. to end its military aid to Israel and push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The immediate focus is the Rafah city, where Israel has warned that it will launch a ground offensive in the coming few days.
Now, days after a massacre by Israeli troops in Gaza City triggered fears of complicating ceasefire negotiations, Cairo is hosting a critical round of talks between the two sides. But the conversation reached a dead end before it could even begin. The latest development, an Israeli official had said that the country will not be sending its delegation to the Egyptian capital. An Israeli newspaper has quoted a top official saying that since Hamas is not revealing a list of names for the hostages still alive in Gaza, Israeli negotiators will not be heading for talks in Egypt. Now, the most recent complication comes shortly after a Hamas delegation reportedly reached Cairo for the ceasefire talks. In terms of the fine print of the agreement, Hamas says that a deal is possible within 24 to 48 hours if Israel accepts demands. However, that condition hangs in the balance, as Israeli counterparts are yet to come to the table for discussions. Let's remind you, Hamas's demands as part of the ceasefire negotiations include complete withdrawal of Israel's military from Gaza and a boost to humanitarian aid in the war-ravaged enclave. Now, according to a senior Hamas leader, the group has demanded the entry of at least 400 to 500 trucks into Gaza per day, carrying food, medicine, or even fuel. In the backdrop of the recent complications, Gaza continues to crumble under fresh overnight Israeli strikes. IDF struck Khan Yunis and Rafah, two regions that have witnessed heightened military aggression in the past few weeks. Eyewitnesses say that 14 people have been killed in a strike on a camp that houses hundreds of displaced Palestinians. And for the latest, we earlier spoke to Peter Kuznick, who is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University, and this is what he had to say.
Well, the world was a little bit more hopeful. We had some better signs that something positive was going to occur, but the Israelis at this point are not ready to engage in these kind of serious talks. Both sides have put out their demands, and the Palestinians have not met the Israeli demand, as you mentioned, for the names of hostages who are still alive. At the Israeli side, they're very, very hesitant, and Netanyahu is strongly opposed to pulling all Israeli troops out for at least 6 weeks, which is what Hamas is demanding. I think the aid issue is the most easy to resolve. but this is a question of the names versus the withdrawal of Israeli troops. And the other thing that's happening is Gantz's visit to the United States, as you know.
And as we speak, the sheer number of dead bodies continue to mount in Gaza. The death toll in the war-torn enclave has surpassed 30,000. In Rafah, funeral services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the Gaza war, infant twins Vezam and Naim Abu Anza were also among the ones who were buried.
My son is still under the rubble. My brother-in-law was martyred along with his 2 children. He waited for them for 16 years. His wife had fertilization, IVF more than once. They died.
Many are still trapped under the rubble of ruins in Gaza's southernmost city. Palestinian Civil Defense released a video showing crews conducting rescue operations after airstrikes on Rafah. Meanwhile, the United States carried out its first humanitarian airdrops over the weekend. U.S. military planes delivered more than 38,000 meals into a territory where the United Nations says over 500,000 people are one step away from famine conditions. However, critics and aid agencies claim that it is extremely difficult to ensure that airdrops do not end up in the hands of Hamas militants. Well, as Israel pursues its war with Hamas, experts claim that being forced to costly and inefficient airdrops, it just shows Washington's limited influence over Israel.
We have crossings. It is better to send aid via crossings and better than dropping via parachutes. The parachutes aid is not enough for one family. This is nothing. Egypt should open its crossing and let trucks get in normally.
Calls for a ceasefire in Gaza are echoing across the globe. Hands-off Rafah rallies are being held in cities worldwide. Demonstrators in Washington, D.C. called on the U.S. to end its military aid to Israel and push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The immediate focus is the Rafah city, where Israel has warned that it will launch a ground offensive in the coming few days. And our top focus to be on right now is our continuous coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. In the latest, mediators in Egypt made a renewed push for a Gaza ceasefire, but differences remained as fighting raged on Sunday between the Israeli forces and the Hamas militants. The Palestinian territory continues to be gripped by desperate food shortages, and U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has now called for a proposed 6-week ceasefire deal to be accepted. Kamala Harris also criticized Israel over insufficient aid supply into Gaza. Take a listen.
We saw hungry, desperate people approach aid trucks, simply trying to secure food for their families after weeks of nearly no aid reaching northern Gaza. And they were met with gunfire and chaos. Our hearts break for the victims of that horrific tragedy. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire for at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
Kamala Harris's comments were the strongest to date by a U.S. administration official on Israel. A U.S. official said that Israel had broadly accepted the deal, which would see a 6-week cessation of hostilities if Hamas agrees to release the most vulnerable hostages. Calling on Hamas to accept the deal, Kamala Harris said it will get the hostages out and also get a significant amount of aid into Gaza. She added that Hamas claims it wants a ceasefire. Well, there is a deal on the table, and as we have said, Hamas needs to agree to that deal. Harris is due to meet Benny Gantz, a centrist member of Israel's war cabinet in Washington, D.C. later today. The former Israeli military chief, a longtime rival of Netanyahu, will also meet White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. An official from Netanyahu's far-right Likud party said that Gantz's trip was planned without authorization from the Israeli leader. Speaking to the Associated Press, the official said that Netanyahu had a tough talk with Gantz and told him that the country has just one prime minister. Meanwhile, Egyptian state-linked media reported on Sunday that envoys from US, Qatar and Hamas arrived in Egypt. It marked the latest effort towards a 6-week truce, stepped up aid supply and the exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners. But sticking points remained, including a Hamas demand that Israeli forces should entirely withdraw from the Gaza Strip after almost 5 months of the ongoing devastating war. And Israel, which has so far announced no plans to join the Egypt talks, has demanded Hamas to provide it with a list of 130 remaining captives, including over 30 who are presumed dead. Despite the latest push to halt the fighting sparked by Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, there was no let-up in Israeli bombing and urban combat in Gaza. Several airstrikes were reported in southern Gaza's Rafah and Khan Yunis. Israel's military announced the death of one more soldier in Gaza, bringing to 246, which is the number killed in the ground operations. In Rehoboth, Israel, there were tears and ceremonial gunshots at the funeral of another soldier, Afik Teri. The Hamas media office reported intense tank shelling in northern Gaza, and the Israeli military said it hit about 50 targets, including underground terrorist infrastructure there.
Now, as we speak, the sheer number of dead bodies continue to mount in Gaza. The death toll in the war-torn enclave has surpassed 30,400.
Right, Haim. In Rafah, funeral services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the Gaza war, infant twins Vezam and Naim Abu Anza were also among the ones who were buried.
Many are still trapped under the rubble of ruins in Gaza's southernmost city. Palestinian Civil Defense released a video showing crews conducting rescue operations after airstrikes on Rafah.
Meanwhile, the United States carried out its first humanitarian airdrops over the weekend. U.S. military planes delivered more than 38,000 meals into a territory where the United Nations says over 500,000 people are one step away from famine conditions. However, critics and aid agencies claim that it is extremely difficult to ensure that the airdrops do not end up in the hands of Hamas militants. As Israel pursues its war with Hamas, experts claim that being forced to costly and inefficient airdrops, it just shows Washington's limited influence over Israel.
We have crossings. It is better to send aid via crossings and better than dropping via parachutes. The parachutes aid is not enough for one family. This is nothing. Egypt should open its crossing and let trucks get in normally.
Calls for a ceasefire in Gaza are echoing across the globe. Hands-off Rafah rallies are being held in cities worldwide. Protesters in Washington, D.C. called on the United States to end its military aid to Israel and push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Their immediate focus is the Rafah city, where Israel has warned it will launch a ground offensive in the coming days.
Moving on to other global stories, mediators in Egypt made a renewed push for a Gaza ceasefire, but differences remained as fighting raged on Sunday between the Israeli forces and the Hamas militants.
Now, the Palestinian territory continues to be gripped by desperate food shortages, and U.S. Vice President called for a proposed 6-week ceasefire deal to be accepted. Kamala Harris also criticized Israel over insufficient aid deliveries to Gaza. Listen to this.
The immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
Kamala Harris's comments were the strongest to date by U.S. administration official on Israel. A U.S. official said that Israel had broadly accepted the deal, which would see a 6-week cessation of hostilities if Hamas agrees to release the most vulnerable hostages. Calling on Hamas to accept the deal, Kamala Harris said it will get the hostages out and also get a major amount of aid into Gaza. Well, she added that Hamas claims it wants a ceasefire. Well, there is a deal on the table, and as we have said, Hamas needs to agree to that deal.
Now, Harris is due to meet with Benny Gantz, a centrist member of Israel's war cabinet, in Washington later today. The former Israeli military chief, a longtime rival of Netanyahu, will also meet White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
An official from Netanyahu's far-right Likud party said that Gantz's trip was planned without any kind of authorization from the Israeli leader. Speaking to the Associated Press, the official said that Netanyahu had a tough talk with Gantz and told him that the country has just one prime minister.
Egyptian state-linked media also reported Sunday that envoys from the United States, Qatar and Hamas arrived in Cairo. It marked the latest effort towards a 6-week truce, stepped up aid deliveries and the exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners. But sticking points remained, including a Hamas demand that Israeli forces entirely withdraw from the Gaza Strip after almost 5 months of devastating war. And Israel, which has so far announced no plans to join the Egypt talks, has demanded Hamas provide it with a list of 130 remaining captives, including over 30 feared dead.
Despite the latest push to halt the fighting sparked by Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, there was, however, no let-up in Israeli bombing and urban combat in Gaza. Several airstrikes were reported in southern Gaza's Rafah and Khan Yunis.
Israel's military also announced the death of one more soldier in Gaza, bringing to the number to 246 killed in ground operations. In Rehovot, Israel, there were tears and ceremonial gunshots at the funeral of another soldier, Afiq Teri.
The Hamas media office reported intense tank shelling in northern Gaza, and the Israeli military said that it hit about 50 targets, including underground terrorist infrastructure. And as we speak, the sheer number of dead bodies continue to mount in Gaza. The death toll in the war-torn territory has surpassed 30,000. In Rafah, funeral services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the ongoing war in Gaza, infant twins Wessam and Naeem Abu Wanza were also among the ones who were buried. Many are still trapped under the rubble of ruins in Gaza's southernmost city. Palestinian Civil Defense released a video showing crew conducting rescue operations after airstrikes on Rafah.
Okay, I got to close it up. We've run out of time, and thank you for joining me. Have a great evening of Just Say No.
Thank you.